But so it's not just, but sometimes people go. There was one guy went with Ray Jennings to India. He had a little money, and he was going to set the world on fire, save the world. He got off the airplane, felt the heat, went in the airport, and bought a ticket back. He never even got out of the airport, So it didn't take long to ruin his little dream, of the thing. But the thing is, you want to go where God tells you to go. Amen. And to obey what God tells you to do, and to say what God tells you to say. And when God does that, you see there's a burden. Habakkuk, the Lord, first chapter of Habakkuk mentions his burden. And then the second chapter mentions his vision. And the third chapter, his prayer. And often when God calls you somewhere, he'll give you a burden. And, you could say, well, why don't you just stay here in Newport News and, preach to the poor people in Newport News? Well, I do that when I'm here, but I've got this burden for this place. And when God puts that burden in your heart, then there's nothing you can do. There's no rest. There's no... I remember when I was in university and I went to 3 different locations to preach during the week. And going to these places and eating and fellowshipping and preaching and staying until midnight praying for people and driving back home, and take about 8 hours on average, So 3 times a week I'm preaching. I'm putting in 24 hours a week, and I'm going to school full time, and I've got a job, and I just didn't have enough time. And finally, I had to make a decision. I either had to quit school, and I knew that wasn't right. I knew that wasn't what the Lord wanted. So I either had to quit my job, or I had to quit the preaching. And normally you say, well, that'd be easy, Bill, just quit your job. But there were special reasons. I needed that money to pay my mother back and try to be a witness to her and so forth. And I remember I was really struggling with that. And I went, and when it got the pressure, because I didn't have any time to do my homework, and all the tests were coming, the midterm tests were coming, and I knew I was going to make some really bad grades. And the Lord had helped me make good grades, and now I was going to really flunk out bad. And the pressure was really getting to me. And I remember the one night I stayed up all night weeping. Didn't sleep at all. Got up the next day, went to work, came home, did something as much as I could, and got in the car and drove to preach. Came back about 1. So that night I was just up weeping again. And I hadn't had any sleep, and I finally said, this is ridiculous. I've got to have an answer right now. I can't take this any longer. And I got up, and I turned on the light at my desk, tried not to wake my roommate up. But, I did the Robert Ewing Bible study method, and flipped the Bible open. And so I only recommend this when it works. And I flipped the Bible open, put my finger down. It was Nehemiah 8:10, which is a verse you all are familiar with part of it, in which he says, the joy of the Lord is our strength. But the part that got me was he said it was a feast day, and he said, he told the Israelites to not to weep not, mourn not. This is a holy day. And the joy of the Lord is your strength. But then he also said, he says, eat the fat and drink the sweet and send portions to those for whom nothing is prepared. And God showed me so clearly as I wept and wept, ruined another Bible with tears. Now I ruin keyboards with tears. It's a little more expensive. But he showed me so clearly that he had given me the sweet and the fat. He had let me be at a feast of the Bible. He'd given me Bible teachers and pastors that were gifted and anointed, and had given me a desire to learn and to study. And I had, sat at the king's table, so to speak, eating and drinking of all the goodness of the Lord. And yet here were people in these little towns I was going to, and nothing was prepared for them. They didn't have a church, they didn't have a pastor, they didn't have a teacher, and they were just hanging on. And God was sending me to bring them portions. And I wept and wept and told the Lord I would quit my job. And the next week when I went to these places, they'd never given me an offering. In all the year I'd been going there, they'd never given me an offering. That week, they all three started giving me an offering. And it was like 3 times as much as I was making at my job. So I was able to pay my mother off right away and keep going. But that stuck with me. Sometimes people have said to me, and I don't know, but they said I had a very good ministry and a very good teaching, and I could be on TV and I could have a big church and all this stuff, but and God knows all about that. That in the Old Testament, Moses' father-in-law, he came to see about things after they came out of Egypt. And he yes. And he advised Moses about getting some leaders to help him. And he said, you have rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds and rulers of 50s and rulers of 20s and rulers of 10s. Different people have different abilities. I can preach to thousands, but I can't lead thousands. Put me in front of 1,000 people, I'll preach, I'll teach. And I've done it. But you ask me to lead more than 100. 100, I'm over my head, So I don't worry about that. But I know this, God's always said, and I've always had the burden to reach those for whom nothing is prepared. And when I see people in that need and with those needs, it's like, hey, I'm all set. And people feel like, well, Bill wouldn't want to come here. Bill wasn't going to do that because he's a rich American and he can do all these other things. And I'll say, when the men from China last time asked me to come and train them, and I was the first Caucasian they had seen since the 40s. And the one lady there was 80-something, and she had been there when the Caucasians came and preached. So Barbara gave me a book about it. It was really neat. But I was the first Caucasian they'd seen in their lifetime in the church. They'd seen a few tourists around. When you see them, when you're out in the car or something, and they see you in this area, it's like they do a double take, isn't it? Not expecting to see a wild man from Borneo